On debate.
Thank you. I am pleased to stand up today in support of Bill S-241, the Jane Goodall Act. The long-awaited legislation will ban new captivity of big cats, bears, wolves, sea lions, seals, walruses, certain monkeys, and dangerous reptiles at roadside zoos. It will require permits for breeding and acquisition of species like big cats, phase out elephant captivity in Canada, and provide limited legal standing for certain species. It will also require designated animal care organizations to meet stringent criteria, including the highest standards of animal care, whistleblower protection, responsible acquisition, and no use of animals in circus-style shows. This bill will not affect the operations of responsible zoos and aquariums who already abide by the highest standards of animal welfare. In fact, the Jane Goodall Act has been endorsed by the Calgary Zoo, the Toronto Zoo, Winnipeg's Assiniboine Park and Zoo, the Granby Zoo in Quebec, and the Montreal Biodome. I'll take this opportunity to address questions that were asked at the Chamber last week about why an American organization, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, AZA, is held up as a standard for animal care as opposed to Canada's Accredited of Zoos and Aquariums, CAZA. CAZA standards have been criticized for being overbroad and subjective, and they do not necessarily remove accreditations from zoos that violate these standards. AZA has higher standards, is much more stringent about enforcing penalties for non-compliance, and has historically been quicker to ban inhumane practices. For example, CAZA banned elephant rides a decade after AZA did, and after AZA had already banned them, and only after a vicious elephant attack occurred at a CAZA-accredited zoo. And CAZA standards continue to be lower for elephant care. AZA standards allow only protected contact with elephants. What that means is that humans cannot be in the enclosure with the elephants. Well, CAZA allows that sort of contact, which can be distressing to the animal and dangerous for the handlers. One of my honourable colleagues asked why we would essentially outsource accreditation of Canadian zoos to an American body. Other Canadian professionals, including engineers and medical practitioners, are accredited by American organizations. This is because larger organizations like AZA often have more resources to enforce regulatory standards. For instance, AZA has access to a wider pool of animal care experts to ensure proper and unbiased inspections of zoos. And because they have more due-paying members, AZA has the financial cushion to revoke accreditations of zoos who don't meet their standards. Canada's AZA-accredited zoos consistently meet the highest standards of animal care, and their support of this bill speaks to its importance. Before I get to why this bill is necessary, I'd like to talk a bit about my local zoo to illustrate the positive impacts of accredited Canadian zoos. The Calgary Zoo meets the rigorous accreditation standards of the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, WAZA, and the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, AZA. Their conservation arm, known as the Wilder Institute, has spearheaded groundbreaking animal protection and international development efforts in Canada and around the world. In 1998, the Calgary Zoo's Wilder Institute supported the creation of the Weichau Community Hippo Sanctuary, dedicated to conserving the Ghana's endangered hippopotamuses. The sanctuary monitors and protects the hippo population by combining conservation and protected area management with ecotourism and economic development. The Wilder Institute's work in Ghana is a model for protecting the ecosystem without sacrificing jobs and the economy. In fact, the Hippo Sanctuary actually creates jobs and industry in the region. The sanctuary embraces responsible ecotourism with a hippo viewing platform, which allows visitors to admire the majestic creatures while making it easier for conservationists to monitor the animals. But that's not all. The sanctuary also features an organic shea cooperative and shea butter producing centre, which employs nearly 2,000 local women. This initiative provides employment and income for over 20% of the local population, ensuring that the communities will never have to sacrifice environmental protection in the name of commerce. And by employing women, it's helping to advance gender equality in Ghana, allowing women a degree of economic and political equality that did not exist before, all while stabilizing and increasing Ghana's hippo population. The Calgary Zoo Wilder Institute also does good work close to home. Since 1985, the zoo's off-site conservation breeding facility has ensured the survival of species like whooping cranes and Vancouver Island marmots. Last summer, they broke ground on a new facility in Wheatland County, Alberta, which will allow them to expand their conservation efforts with improved habitats and more space. An example of the work they do there, the Wilder Institute has partnered with federal and provincial governments and the Canadian Wildlife Service to protect endangered burrowing owls in the prairies. The Institute collects the youngest and least likely to survive owlets and take care of them through the fall and winter, increasing their odds of survival when they're reintroduced into the wild. They cared for 20 of these tiny owls in 2021 alone. The zoo is also embarking on a new project to advance their Arctic conservation efforts, including a polar bear sanctuary. This commitment to animal welfare will be familiar to anyone who's ever toured the Calgary Zoo. Visitors to the zoo will find safe and spacious enclosures that provide a suitable habitat for the animals, not to mention enrichment items that allow them to exercise their bodies and brains. They'll meet experienced staff who understand and prioritize the needs of animals. What you won't find are degrading circus acts, cruel elephant rides, or animal handling activities that cause undue stress to the animals. The Calgary Zoo's own staff don't have any physical contact with the animals except when providing medical treatment. There couldn't be more of a difference between accredited, responsible zoos like the Calgary Zoo and the unregulated, unaccredited, and irresponsible roadside zoos that this bill targets. CTV's W5 recently aired a disturbing report on roadside zoos here in Ontario, exposing cruel treatment of animals ranging from inhumane enclosures and inappropriate contact with humans to outright physical abuse. Alligators trapped in tiny pools full of feces. Monkeys confined to small cages, pacing in circles and biting themselves because they have no other stimulation. Tigers behind substandard fencing. An animal trainer bragging about abusing a defenseless lion cub. Undercover footage from these roadside zoos has also revealed a cavalier attitude towards the safety of guests, including children. The W5 report included footage of children sticking their fingers into cages holding sharp-toothed lemurs, and in one case, an animal handler holding a baby, a human baby, in one arm while petting a lion with the other. This type of recklessness puts the lives of both humans and animals at risk. In 2016, police were called after a white lion escaped from its enclosure in the Papanak Zoo. The zoo blamed human error for the escape. The lion was shot dead. Due to insufficient regulation, the burden of cracking down on these irresponsible organizations often falls to local municipalities. This is why we need strong federal regulation to prevent these travesties before they occur. Zoos, at their best, are places of wonder and education. Many conservationists and animal rights activists gain their love of animals and nature from these early experiences. But animals are not just here for our entertainment. They are sentient beings that feel pain, and for that matter, fear, stress, happiness, affection, and perhaps even love. Elephants are herd animals who crave socialization and grieve their dead. Certain apes have been observed comforting other apes in distress, and primate mothers have been observed mourning lost infants, caring for their bodies for weeks or months after death. Octopuses, who we didn't even believe were sentient until recently, are clever and curious creatures who have been known to solve puzzles and use tools. When animals don't have the space, privacy, and socialization with other animals they need, they act in abnormal ways. Whales in captivity have demonstrated dangerous compulsive tendencies, chewing on the walls of their tank, vomiting up their food to play with it, and injuring themselves by ramming into walls. Whales who have been trained to beach themselves as part of their act start to do this compulsively even when not performing, which causes internal organ damage and kidney failure. Captive animals who aren't properly cared for pose a threat to humans. An orca who performed at SeaWorld for over 20 years was responsible for the violent deaths of 3 people, including 2 trainers who he attacked and pulled underwater. Closer to home, an aggressive elephant killed a handler at Hamilton's African Lion Safari in 1989. 30 years later, another elephant attack at the same zoo prompted the Canada's accredited zoos and aquariums to ban elephant rides. Many Canadians have fond memories of riding an elephant at the circus, petting a whale at Marineland, holding snakes at a roadside zoo. But these practices were developed at a time when we knew very little about animals, when we didn't understand that they have emotional needs and that they can become dangerous to themselves and others when those needs are met. But we know now more about animals, and it would be irresponsible to disregard decades of research and observation, not to mention basic principles of dignity and decency, for the sake of our amusement. I urge my colleagues in the Senate to support this bill.